Andrew Sterling thought he was discarding a broken woman. He believed the divorce papers he handed her in front of 500 guests would finally crush her spirit. But he made a fatal calculation. Madeline didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply signed her name, capped her pen, and smiled the way a predator smiles at trapped prey. Andrew went to sleep that night thinking he had won his freedom. He woke up the next morning to find his bank accounts frozen, his servers wiped, and his billion-dollar empire turning to dust. This isn't just a story about a marriage ending, it's the story of a 10-year trap snapping shut. The air inside the grand ballroom of the Pierre Hotel smelled of expensive lilies, old money, and impending disaster. It was the 10th wedding anniversary of Andrew and Madeline Sterling, a couple that graced the cover of Forbes and Vogue with equal frequency. Andrew was the CEO of Sterling Vanguard, a private equity firm that swallowed smaller companies whole. Madeline was his shadow, a former art curator who had, seemingly, faded into the beige background of charity luncheons and silent support. Andrew adjusted his bespoke Brioni tuxedo, checking his reflection in the hallway mirror before entering the ballroom. He looked good for 52. The silver at his temples only made him look more distinguished, more shark-like. "Are the papers ready?" Andrew whispered into his phone, his voice low but sharp. "Yes, Mr. Sterling," his lawyer, Harrison, replied on the other end. The process server is disguised as one of the waiters. Signal is the toast. But Andrew, are you sure you want to do this here? It's aggressive. Aggressive is how I built a $4 billion portfolio. Harrison, Andrew sneered. I want the prenup enforced publicly. I want witnesses. I want her to know she has zero leverage, so she doesn't try to drag this out in court. Jessica is waiting for me in Paris. I'm done playing house. Andrew hung up. He wasn't just leaving Madeline. He was discarding her. He had been moving assets offshore for 2 years, hiding the true valuation of Sterling Vanguard. According to the paperwork he'd cooked up, the company was struggling, meaning Madeline's payout would be a pittance. He walked into the ballroom. The applause was polite, restrained. Madeline stood by the centerpiece, wearing a vintage emerald velvet gown that hugged her slender frame. She looked tired, Andrew thought. Weak. She was holding a glass of champagne, her knuckles slightly white. "Happy anniversary, darling," Andrew said, loud enough for the nearby senator to hear. He kissed her cheek. It was howled. Madeline turned to him. Her eyes, usually a soft hazel, looked dark tonight. Harder. "You're late, Andrew." "Business calls." He dismissed her, grabbing a drink. "Smile, Maddie. The cameras are watching." She did smile. But it wasn't the practiced, vacant smile he was used to. It was a small, tight curvature of the lips that didn't reach her eyes. It looked almost like pity. The night wore on. The tension in the room was palpable to everyone but Andrew, who was too busy basking in his own ego. At 9 p.m., Andrew tapped his spoon against his crystal glass. The room quieted. "Friends, partners, rivals," Andrew began, his voice booming. 10 years, a decade. People said we wouldn't last. He chuckled, and a few sycophants laughed with him. "But tonight, I want to make a special announcement. A transition, if you will." This was the signal. A waiter approached Madeline, holding a silver tray. But instead of champagne, there was a thick manila envelope. Andrew watched with sadistic glee. "Open it," he thought. "Cry. Make a scene, so I can call you unstable and get custody of the image rights." Madeline looked at the envelope. She looked at the waiter. Then, she looked at Andrew. She didn't gasp. She didn't tremble. "Is this it, Andrew?" she asked, her voice calm, amplified by the silence of the room. "The exit strategy?" Andrew frowned. That was a business term. Madeline didn't use business terms. "Just open it, Madeline." She opened the envelope. She scanned the divorce petition. The crowd murmured. The humiliation was supposed to be crushing. A wife served divorce papers at her own anniversary party. It was social suicide. But Madeline didn't look humiliated. She reached into her small clutch, pulled out a Mont Blanc pen, a gift Andrew had given her years ago, and uncapped it. "You've been trying to force me to sign these for 3 months, haven't you?" she said, loud enough for the front row to hear. "You think I don't know about the apartment in Soho? You think I don't know about Jessica?" A gasp rippled through the crowd. "Sign it," Andrew hissed, his smile dropping. "Don't make this worse for yourself." "Oh, I'm not making it worse, Andrew," Madeline said. She placed the papers on the waiter's tray and signed them with a flourish. Signature, distinct, clear. "I'm making it final." She capped the pen. She looked at Andrew, and then the smile came back. It was a radiant, terrifying smile. It was the smile of someone who had just watched a man step onto a landmine but hadn't told him to lift his foot yet. "I, Madeline Sterling, accept the terms of the separation as dictated by the 2014 prenuptial agreement, specifically Section 8, Clause C, regarding intellectual property and original assets." Andrew blinked. Section 8? Clause C? He didn't remember that. The prenup was standard, ironclad protection for him. "Goodbye, Andrew," she said softly. "I hope you enjoy the company. What's left of it." She turned on her heel, the emerald dress flowing like liquid water, and walked out of the ballroom. No tears, no screaming, just a calm, rhythmic clicking of heels against marble. Andrew stood there, the papers on the tray. He felt a sudden, cold sweat prickle his neck. He looked at Harrison, his lawyer, who was standing in the corner. Harrison looked pale. She signed. Andrew announced to the room, trying to recover. "Well, to new beginnings." He drank his champagne in one gulp, but the taste was bitter. Why had she smiled? 6:30 a.m. The next morning, Andrew Sterling woke up in the master suite of their penthouse on Fifth Avenue. The bed was empty. The closet door was open, and Madeline's side was stripped bare. No clothes, no jewelry, no shoes. She hadn't just left, she had evaporated. He stretched, feeling a surge of triumph. It was done. The leech was gone. He picked up his phone to call Jessica, eager to tell her to pack her bags for the penthouse. But his phone had 7 missed calls. 30 from his CFO, David Thorne, 12 from Harrison, the lawyer, 5 from members of the board of directors. Andrew frowned. It was 6:30 in the morning. He dialed David Thorne first. "David? Why are you calling me at this hour? I'm celebrating." "Andrew, shut up and listen to me." David's voice was unrecognizable. It was high-pitched, breathless, verging on hysteria. "Where is she? Where is Madeline?" "She's gone. I served her. She signed." "Why?" "Andrew, you need to get to the office. Now? The servers are locked. All of them." "What do you mean locked? Call IT." "No, Andrew, you don't understand. It's not a glitch. It's a revocation of license. We tried to log into the trading algorithm, the Vanguard black box, and we got a pop-up." "A pop-up?" Andrew was putting on his pants now, phone pressed to his ear. "What does it say?" "It says, access denied. User license revoked by owner, M. Sterling Holdings LLC." Andrew froze, one sock on, one sock off. M. Sterling. Madeline doesn't own the algorithm. Sterling Vanguard owns the algorithm. I paid the developers millions 10 years ago. Andrew? David sounded like he was crying. "I'm looking at the original incorporation documents right now. The ones from 10 years ago. The ones from before the IPO. When you started the company, you were being sued by your previous partners, remember? You couldn't hold assets in your name." The memory hit Andrew like a freight train. 10 years ago. He was in a vicious legal battle with his old firm. He needed to hide the core intellectual property, the code that predicted market trends, the secret sauce of his billions, so his old partners couldn't seize it. He had put it in a blind trust. A trust assigned to his fiancée, to Madeline. "Harrison told me we transferred that back." Andrew screamed, running out of the bedroom. "We transferred it back after the wedding." "I'm looking at the transfer documents, Andrew," David yelled back. "They were signed by you, but..." "Oh my God. But what?" The transfer clause had a condition. It says the IP rights revert to Sterling Vanguard only as long as the marriage between Andrew Sterling and Madeline Sterling remains valid and contested. Andrew stopped running in the hallway. The silence of the penthouse was deafening. "Read that again," Andrew whispered. "Upon the dissolution of the marriage via signed agreement," David read, his voice shaking, "all rights to the source code, the client database, and the operational trademarks revert immediately to the original holder, Madeline Sterling." Andrew dropped the phone. The screen cracked against the marble floor. Section 8, Clause C. That's what she had said last night. "I accept the terms." Specifically Section 8. He hadn't just divorced his wife. He had just signed a document handing the legal ownership of his entire company's operating system back to her. Without that code, Sterling Vanguard was just a room full of men in suits staring at blank screens. They couldn't trade. They couldn't access client funds. They couldn't move a single cent. Andrew scrambled to pick up the phone. He dialed Harrison. "Fix it," Andrew roared. "Harrison, tell me this is a joke." "It's not a joke, Andrew," Harrison sounded defeated. "I've been up all night. I pulled the prenup. She's right. The language is vague, but it's binding. And Andrew, it gets worse. How can it possibly get worse? Madeline didn't just revoke the license. She sold it." Andrew felt his knees give way. He slumped against the wall. She sold the algorithm? At 12:01 a.m., 1 minute after she left the party, a shell company in Zurich bought the exclusive rights to the Vanguard black box code. "Who?" Andrew gasped. "Who bought it? We don't know yet. It's a blind LLC, but the purchase price was $1. $1? She gave it away, Andrew. She gave away the engine of your company for $1, which means whoever has it now can charge us whatever they want to turn the lights back on. Or they can just keep it off and watch us burn." Andrew hung up. He ran to the elevator. He needed to get to the office. He needed to find a loophole. As he burst out of his building, paparazzi were already waiting. Usually, they were there to snap photos of his suits or his cars. Today, they were shouting questions. "Mr. Sterling, is it true Sterling Vanguard has frozen withdrawals? Mr. Sterling, who is Madeline Sterling partnering with? Andrew, look here, is it true you're bankrupt?" He shoved past them, diving into his waiting limousine. "Office," he screamed at the driver. Inside the car, he pulled out his tablet. He logged into his personal bank account. He needed cash. He needed to prepare for a war. He typed in his password. Access denied. He tried again. Access denied. A notification popped up on the screen. It was an email from the bank's fraud department. Subject: Joint account lockout. Dear Mr. Sterling, per the request of the secondary account holder, Mrs. Madeline Sterling, a freeze has been placed on all joint assets, pending a forensic audit regarding misappropriation of marital funds for illicit activities. She had frozen his personal cash. She knew about the money he spent on Jessica. She was flagging it as dissipation of assets. Andrew stared at the screen. His hands were shaking uncontrollably. He wasn't fighting a scorned woman. He was fighting a grandmaster who had been memorizing the board for 10 years, while he was too busy looking in the mirror. The car screeched to a halt in front of the Sterling Vanguard Tower on Wall Street. But Andrew couldn't get out, because standing in front of the building, blocking the entrance, were federal agents in blue windbreakers. The letters on the back were yellow and bright. SEC, FBI. Andrew watched through the tinted glass as they carried boxes of files out of his building. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. He opened it. No words, just a picture. It was a photo taken from inside a private jet. A glass of champagne sat on a tray next to a signed document. And in the background, out the window, the sun was rising over the Atlantic. She was gone. And she had taken his life with her. The morning sun hit the glass facade of the Sterling Vanguard Tower, turning the building into a blinding pillar of gold. Inside, however, the atmosphere was closer to a funeral. Andrew Sterling didn't run. He walked. He forced his legs to move with a steady, rhythmic cadence despite the chaos erupting around him. He buttoned his suit jacket, smoothed his tie, and stepped out of the limousine into the flashbulbs. "Mr. Sterling, are the rumors of insider trading true? Is it true your wife has seized the assets?" He ignored them, pushing through the revolving doors into the lobby. The air conditioning hit him a wall of artificial chill that felt like the temperature of a morgue. The lobby, usually a cathedral of hushed commerce, was a disaster zone. Agents and FBI, windbreakers were everywhere, carrying boxes marked evidence. His employees, analysts, who graduated top of their class from Harvard and Wharton, stood in clusters, looking terrified, clutching their personal belongings in cardboard boxes. Andrew Harrison, his lawyer, emerged from the crowd. He looked like he had aged 10 years in 10 hours. His usually pristine collar was unbuttoned, his tie loose. "They're taking the hard drives, Andrew," Harrison hissed, grabbing Andrew by the elbow and dragging him toward a quiet alcove near the elevators. "The SEC has a warrant. They're calling it a precautionary seizure, based on a whistleblower complaint." "Whistleblower?" Andrew spat the word out like poison. "Madeline? Who else?" Harrison wiped sweat from his forehead. "She didn't just leave, Andrew. She dropped a nuclear bomb on her way out. She submitted a 400-page dossier to the Department of Justice at 8 a.m. this morning. It details every offshore account, every shell company, every time you manipulated a stock price to squeeze out a rival." Andrew felt the blood drain from his face. "She doesn't know about those. I never told her." "You didn't have to," Harrison whispered, his voice trembling. "She was the one organizing your home office, remember? For 10 years. You treated her like a secretary. You let her shred your documents because you were too lazy to do it yourself. You let her have the passwords because you couldn't be bothered to remember them. You thought she was stupid, Andrew. You thought she was just decoration." Andrew leaned against the cold marble wall. He remembered. He remembered handing her stacks of sensitive files to deal with while he took calls from Jessica. He remembered laughing when she asked questions about the Cayman accounts, patting her on the head and telling her not to worry her pretty little mind about business. She hadn't been shredding them. She had been scanning them. "Where is she now?" Andrew asked, his voice low and dangerous. "We tracked the jet," Harrison said. "She landed in Zurich an hour ago. But that's not your biggest problem right now. My biggest problem is that my company is being looted by the feds." "No." Harrison shook his head grimly. "Your biggest problem is the buyer. The entity that bought the algorithm code for $1. Who is it?" Andrew demanded. "Who has my life's work?" Harrison pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. He hesitated before handing it over. "It's a newly formed holding company, registered in Delaware, yesterday. It's called the Second Chance Initiative." Andrew frowned. "That sounds like a charity." "It is," Harrison said. "And the CEO of the holding company is Sebastian Cole." Andrew stopped breathing. Sebastian Cole. 5 years ago, Sebastian had been Andrew's mentor. A kind, older man who ran a clean, ethical fund. Andrew had destroyed him. He had spread rumors of insolvency, shorted Sebastian's stock into the ground, and bought his company for pennies on the dollar. He had driven Sebastian into bankruptcy and public humiliation just for sport. "Sebastian is retired," Andrew stammered. He's growing grapes in Napa." "Not anymore," Harrison said. "Madeline gave him the code, Andrew. She gave your greatest weapon to your greatest enemy." And 10 minutes ago, Sebastian Cole issued a press release. Andrew snatched the paper from Harrison. Press release. "The Second Chance Initiative acquires Sterling Vanguard proprietary technology. Our first act as new owners is to permanently suspend the black box trading algorithm. We believe this technology creates unfair market advantages. We are shutting it down. Effective immediately." Andrew stared at the words. They weren't holding the code for ransom. They weren't trying to sell it back to him. They were killing it. "He's destroying it," Andrew whispered, the horror finally setting in. "He's not using it to make money. He's deleting it. Without that algorithm, Sterling Vanguard was nothing. The billions in managed assets would vanish as clients pulled their money out. The leverage would collapse. Fix this, Harrison," Andrew said, his voice cracking. File an injunction. Claim she was mentally unstable. Claim she stole it. We can't, Harrison said softly. You signed the prenup, Andrew. You signed the transfer documents 10 years ago to hide the assets from the taxman. It was legal. It was binding. And frankly, Harrison took a step back, creating distance between them. I can't represent you anymore. Andrew looked up, stunned. What? The retainer check you sent last week bounced this morning, Harrison said, buttoning his jacket. Your personal assets are frozen, Andrew, and I don't work for free. Good luck. Harrison turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd of panicked employees. Andrew stood alone in the lobby of the building that bore his name. He reached into his pocket for his phone to call Jessica. She was the only one left. She would understand. They could go to the villa in Street Barts. He still had cash stashed there in a safe. He dialed her number. Hello? Her voice was crisp, hurried. Background noise, zippers, clatter. Jessica, it's me. Listen, things are complicated. Pack a bag. We need to leave the country for a while until this blows over. There was a long silence on the other end. Then, a sigh. Andrew, I'm at the airport. Relief washed over him. Good girl. You're ahead of me. Which terminal? I'm coming. I'm not waiting for you, Andrew, Jessica said. Her voice was cold, devoid of the sweetness he was used to. I'm going to Dubai. Alone. What? Jessica, what are you talking about? Madeline called me, Jessica said. Andrew froze. She called you? Last night. Before the party. She told me everything. Andrew. She told me about the debt. She told me that the penthouse you promised me is actually leased in the company's name and is about to be seized. She told me you're not a billionaire. You're a fraud living on credit. She's lying, Andrew screamed, ignoring the stares of the FBI agents nearby. I have millions. Not anymore, Jessica said. And honestly, Andrew, you're 52. Without the money. You're just an old man with a bad temper. Goodbye. The line went dead. Andrew lowered the phone. He looked around the lobby. The empire he had built on ruthlessness, on stepping over people, on discarding anyone who wasn't useful. It was dissolving. He walked toward the elevators, pressing the button for the top floor. He needed to get to his office. He needed a drink. But when he swiped his keycard to access the executive floor, the little light on the panel didn't turn green. It turned red. Access denied. He swiped again. Frantic. Access denied. A security guard, a man Andrew had walked past every day for 5 years without ever saying hello, to step forward. I'm sorry, Mr. Sterling, the guard said, his face impassive. Building management has been instructed to revoke your clearance. My clearance? Andrew laughed, a high, hysterical sound. I own this building. Actually, sir, the guard said, checking his clipboard. Technically, the building is owned by a subsidiary of the holding company, and the new owner, Mr. Cole, has put you on the no-entry list. Andrew stared at the guard. Then he stared at the glass doors. He saw his reflection. He didn't look like a titan of industry anymore. He looked small. He turned around and walked back out into the street. The paparazzi swarmed him, blinded him. Mr. Sterling, how does it feel to lose everything? Andrew didn't answer. He just kept walking. He had nowhere to go. Zurich. Switzerland. 48 hours later. The air in Zurich was crisp, clean, and smelled of pine and old money. In a private chalet overlooking the frozen lake, a fire crackled in the stone hearth. Madeline Sterling sat in a high-backed leather chair, a cup of tea in her hands. She wore a thick cashmere sweater and jeans, no diamonds, no emerald gowns, no makeup. She looked 10 years younger than she had in the ballroom 2 nights ago. She wasn't smiling. She was simply resting. The heavy oak door opened, and a man walked in. He was older, with white hair and kind eyes that were currently filled with a mix of admiration and disbelief. It was Sebastian Cole. The news is calling it the Sterling crash, Sebastian said, placing a tablet on the coffee table. Stock is down 94%. The SEC has indicted him on 12 counts of fraud. They found the offshore accounts this morning. Madeline took a sip of tea. He always used his birthday for the passwords, Sebastian, or mine. He wasn't creative. He was just arrogant. Sebastian sat opposite her. He looked at the woman he had once pitied. Years ago, when Andrew had destroyed Sebastian's company, Sebastian had seen Madeline at a gala. She had looked like a frightened bird then. He had assumed she was just another one of Andrew's possessions. He had been wrong. "You realize what you've done, Madeline?" Sebastian asked softly. "You didn't just divorce him. You surgically removed his entire existence." "He removed mine first," Madeline said, her voice steady. She looked into the fire. "For 10 years, Sebastian, I wasn't a person. I was a prop. When I had a miscarriage in our 3rd year, he told me to reschedule my grief because we had a board dinner that night. When my mother died, he told me not to wear black because it made him look like he was with a widow." She set the tea down. He didn't just want a wife. He wanted a mirror to reflect his own greatness. He isolated me from my friends. He controlled what I ate. He controlled what I read. He made me feel like I couldn't survive without him. She looked up at Sebastian. He forgot one thing. I was an archivist before I met him. My job was to notice details, to catalog things, to remember. "So you cataloged his crimes," Sebastian said. "Every single one," she nodded. "I started 3 years ago. When I found out about Jessica, it wasn't the affair that broke me, Sebastian. It was that he bought her an apartment using the college fund we had set up for the child we never had." Sebastian flinched. That was a level of cruelty even he hadn't expected. "I needed help," Madeline continued. "I couldn't do it alone. I needed someone who knew the code, someone who knew where the digital bodies were buried. And that's where he came in," Sebastian said, looking toward the hallway. A third figure entered the room. A young man, barely 30, wearing a hoodie and glasses. He looked like a generic tech support employee. It was Simon, the head of IT at Sterling Vanguard. The man Andrew had screamed at daily for slow Wi-Fi. The man Andrew had thrown a stapler at once because a printer was jammed. "Hello, Mrs. Sterling?" Simon said, a shy smile on his face. "Hello, Simon," Madeline said warmly. "Is it done?" "Completely," Simon said, sitting on the arm of the sofa. "I executed the kill switch on the server farms 20 minutes ago. The data is irrecoverable. Even if the feds try to piece it together, it's just binary garbage now." Sebastian looked between them. "How? How did you turn his own head of IT against him?" Simon laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Mr. Cole, Andrew didn't know my name. He called me It Guy for 6 years. But Madeline brought me coffee when I was working late. She asked about my sick mother. She paid for my mother's surgery last year, out of her own pocket, secretly when Andrew's insurance plan denied it." Simon looked at Madeline with fierce loyalty. Andrew Sterling thought he could buy loyalty with fear. Madeline earned it with humanity. When she came to me 2 years ago and asked if I could build a backdoor into the system, I didn't hesitate. I spent 2 years writing the code that would dismantle the company from the inside out. Madeline reached out and squeezed Simon's hand. "Thank you, Simon. The best part," Simon added, a mischievous glint in his eye, "is that Andrew thinks it was a legal loophole in the prenup that lost him the code. He doesn't realize the prenup was just the distraction. The code was already gone. I migrated the real database to your private server 6 months ago. The black box he was trading with for the last half year, it was a dummy program. A simulation." Sebastian's jaw dropped. "You mean he hasn't been making real trades?" "He has," Simon explained, "but only on safe, low-yield index funds. The genius high-risk trades he thought he was making? Illusions. We let him think he was still a god, while we slowly siphoned the real liquidity into the escrow account for the DOJ settlement." "So the money isn't gone?" Sebastian asked. "The stolen money is gone," Madeline corrected. "Returned to the victims. The pension funds he raided? I wired it back to them yesterday. The small businesses he crushed? They're getting anonymous grants next week." She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the snow-covered Alps. I didn't want his money, Sebastian. I wanted his reputation. I wanted to make sure that when he wakes up tomorrow, he realizes that the silent wife was the only reason he was standing tall in the first place. Sebastian stood up and joined her at the window. What will you do now, Madeline? You're a free woman. You have a clean slate. I have one more loose end to tie up, she said, her eyes narrowing slightly. Andrew is down, but he's not out. He's a survivor. He'll try to find a scapegoat. He'll try to blame me publicly, spin a narrative that I was the criminal mastermind and he was the victim. She turned to face them. I need to meet him. One last time. Madeline. No, Sebastian warned. It's dangerous. He's desperate. He's not dangerous anymore, Madeline said calmly. He's powerless, and I need him to look me in the eye when I deliver the final piece of the puzzle. The piece he doesn't even know is missing. She picked up her phone. She dialed a number that she knew by heart. It rang once. Twice. Madeline? Andrew's voice answered. It was ragged, broken, filled with a mix of fury and pathetic hope. Hello, Andrew, she said. You bitch, he rasped. You ruined me. I'm going to kill you. Save your energy, Andrew. You can't afford a hitman anymore. Where are you? He demanded. I'm somewhere you can't reach. But I'm willing to meet. There's something you need to sign. I'm not signing anything else. It's not a divorce paper. Andrew, Madeline said, her voice dropping to a whisper. It's a pardon. Silence on the line. What? I have the evidence to keep you out of federal prison, she lied smoothly. Or, I can give it to the prosecutor. It's your choice. Meet me, tomorrow, noon. Where? The place where it all started, Andrew. The boathouse in Central Park. She hung up. Sebastian looked at her, worried. You don't have a pardon, Madeline. You have enough evidence to bury him for life. Why give him hope? Madeline smiled. It was the same smile she had worn in the ballroom. Because, Sebastian, hope is the cruelest thing you can give a man like Andrew. I want to watch the moment he realizes that there is no pardon, that the only thing waiting for him at the boathouse is the truth about why I stayed for 10 years. Central Park Boathouse. 11:55 a.m. The park was a study in desolation. A biting wind whipped off the frozen lake, rattling the bare branches of the elms. It was the kind of cold that seeped through wool and settled in the marrow. Andrew Sterling sat on a green metal bench, his collar turned up against the wind. He wasn't wearing his usual cashmere greatcoat. That had been seized, along with his penthouse, his cars, and his dignity. He was wearing a simple navy parka he'd bought at a tourist shop an hour ago with the last of the cash in his pocket. He checked his watch. 11:58 a.m. He looked like a man hunted. His eyes darted at every jogger, every nanny pushing a stroller. He was terrified the FBI would jump out from behind a bush. But more than that, he was terrified Madeline wouldn't come. She was his only lifeline. If she really had a pardon, if she really had a way to make the fraud charges disappear, he would do anything. He would beg. He would crawl. He would sign whatever she wanted. Andrew. The voice came from behind him. It wasn't the soft, submissive voice of the woman he had married. It was the voice of a judge passing a sentence. He spun around. Madeline stood 10 feet away. She was wearing a trench coat the color of slate, her hands deep in her pockets. Her hair, usually pinned up in a severe chignon for his benefit, was loose, blowing wildly in the wind. She looked feral. Beautiful, but dangerous. You came. Andrew breathed, standing up. His legs felt weak. Do you have it? The pardon? Sit down. Andrew, she commanded. He sat. He didn't want to, but his body obeyed her tone instinctively. She remained standing, looming over him. You look terrible, she observed, her gaze traveling over his cheap jacket and unshaven face. It's only been 48 hours. Most men last a week before they break. Cut the crap, Madeline, Andrew snapped, though his voice lacked its usual venom. You said you could help me. You said you have evidence that clears me. Give it to me. I said I have a document that changes everything, she corrected. She reached into her coat and pulled out a thick, brown envelope. Andrew reached for it, his hands shaking. "Give it to me." "Not yet." She pulled it back. "First, I have a question. And I want the truth. For the first time in our marriage, Andrew, tell me the truth." Andrew groaned. "What? What do you want to know? Did I sleep with Jessica?" "Yes." "Was I hiding money?" "Yes." "I admit it all. Just give me the damn envelope." "I don't care about Jessica," Madeline said, her voice dropping to a chilling whisper. "And I don't care about the money. I want to know about Robert Hale." Andrew froze. The wind seemed to stop. The noise of the city faded into a dull roar. "Robert Hale?" Andrew repeated, his face draining of color. I don't know who that is." "Don't lie to me," she hissed, stepping closer. 12 years ago, before Sterling Vanguard, you were a junior partner at a firm called Obsidian. You were looking for a big score to launch your own fund. You found a small, family-owned biotech company in Boston, Hale Pharmaceuticals. Andrew swallowed hard. He looked away, staring at the frozen lake. It was a business deal. A hostile takeover. It happens every day. "It wasn't a takeover," Madeline corrected, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. "It was a slaughter. You falsified their clinical trial data. You leaked fake reports to the press, saying their heart medication caused strokes. Their stock tanked overnight. You bought the company for scraps, stripped it for parts, and sold the patents for $50 million. That $50 million was the seed money for your empire. It was business." Andrew yelled, standing up. "It's how the game is played. If I hadn't done it, someone else would have." "And what happened to Robert Hale? The founder?" she asked softly. Andrew didn't answer. He couldn't meet her eyes. "Tell me," she demanded. He died," Andrew muttered. "He drove his car off a bridge," Madeline said, tears finally welling in her eyes, not of sadness, but of fury. "2 days after you liquidated his company, he left a wife and a 22-year-old daughter. He left a note saying he couldn't live with the shame of being called a fraud." "It was a tragedy," Andrew said defensively. "I didn't kill him. He was weak." Madeline laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. "He wasn't weak, Andrew. He was honest. That was his mistake. He didn't know he was playing against a cheat." "Why are we talking about ancient history?" Andrew shouted, looking around to see if anyone was watching. "What does this have to do with us? With the pardon?" "Andrew," Madeline said, stepping so close he could smell the faint scent of her perfume, the same perfume she had worn on their first date. "Look at me. Really look at me." Andrew frowned. He looked at her face. The high cheekbones, the hazel eyes. "You never looked, did you?" she whispered. "You only saw the blonde hair and the dress size. You never saw the structure of the face." She reached into the envelope and pulled out a photograph. It was an old, grainy photo of a man holding a little girl. The man was Robert Hale. "You asked me once why I have no family photos," she said. "Why I never talk about my parents. Why I changed my name before I met you." She held the photo up next to her face. The resemblance was undeniable. The same eyes, the same jawline. "My name isn't Madeline Sterling," she said. "And it isn't Madeline Stone, the name on my fake birth certificate. My name is Lydia Hale." Andrew stumbled back, hitting the bench. "No, I am Robert Hale's daughter," she said. "And I didn't marry you for your money, Andrew. I didn't marry you for your status. I married you to be the cancer that would slowly, quietly, eat you alive from the inside." Andrew stared at her, his mind reeling. The last 10 years flashed before his eyes. The chance meeting at the art gallery where she had spilled wine on his shoe. The whirlwind romance. The way she had been so eager to please, so willing to sign the prenup, so quiet during his business dinners. She hadn't been submissive. She had been observant. 10 years, Andrew whispered. "You waited 10 years?" "I had to wait," Madeline Lydia said calmly. "I had to wait until you were vulnerable, until you got sloppy. When you started Sterling Vanguard, you were too careful. But as you got richer, You got lazy. You started cutting corners. You started using the offshore accounts. And I was there, every night, making coffee and memorizing the routing numbers. You, monster, Andrew breathed. I'm the monster? She laughed again. Andrew, I was the perfect wife. I hosted your parties. I ironed your shirts. I listened to your ego for a decade. Do you know how hard it is to sleep next to the man who killed your father and pretend to love him? Do you know the discipline that takes? She threw the envelope onto the bench between them. There is no pardon in there, Andrew. Andrew looked at the envelope. Then what is it? It's the final nail, she said. It's the original clinical trial data from Hale Pharmaceuticals. The real data. The proof that the drug was safe. The proof that you falsified the reports to crash the stock. Andrew felt his heart hammering against his ribs. The statute of limitations on fraud is. There is no statute of limitations on murder, she interrupted. I didn't murder him. No. But when you falsified those documents, you knowingly caused panic. People who needed that heart medication stopped taking it because of your fake reports. 3 people died of heart failure, Andrew. Not just my father. Patients. She pointed to the distance, toward the tree line of the park. I gave a copy of that file to the district attorney this morning. They aren't charging you with fraud anymore. They're upgrading it. Involuntary manslaughter. Corporate sabotage resulting in death. Andrew spun around. Through the trees, he saw them. Not just FBI agents this time. Uniformed police officers. They were moving slowly, flanking the boathouse, closing the net. You set me up. Andrew whimpered. You brought me here to arrest me. I brought you here to see you break, she said. I wanted you to know who did it. I didn't want you to think it was bad luck, or a market crash. I wanted you to know it was me. Andrew looked at the frozen lake. For a split second, he considered running. Maybe he could make it across the ice? Don't bother, she said, reading his mind. It's thin ice, Andrew, just like your life. He slumped onto the bench, defeated. The fight drained out of him. He looked up at her, his eyes wet. Did you ever love me? He asked. It was a pathetic question, but he had to know. In 10 years, was there ever a moment where it wasn't fake? Madeline looked down at him. Her expression softened, but not with love, with pity. There was one moment, she admitted. About 4 years ago. You came home early. You were sick with the flu. You were delirious, helpless. For a moment, you weren't the titan of industry. You were just a sick, scared man asking for water. I brought you soup. I sat by your bed. Andrew looked hopeful. And I realized, she said coldly, that even when you were weak, you were selfish. You spent the whole night complaining that the soup was too hot, that the pillows were too hard. You never said thank you, not once. That was the night I decided to stop gathering evidence and start executing the plan. Sirens began to wail in the distance, getting louder. Andrew put his head in his hands. What happens to you now? You're the wife of a criminal. Your assets are frozen too. Actually, she said, buttoning her coat. I'm not. Remember the Second Chance Initiative? The company I sold the algorithm to? Sebastian Cole? Andrew spat. Yes. Sebastian Cole creates non-profits. He's turning the algorithm into an open-source public utility. But he paid me a consulting fee. A very large one. Legally earned, taxed, clean. She turned to walk away. Where are you going? Andrew cried out, panic rising as the police cars pulled up to the curb, 50 yards away. I'm going to Paris, she said. I hear it's beautiful this time of year, and I have a painting to buy. One you sold from my collection without asking. 2 officers were running toward them now. Madeline, Andrew screamed. Lydia, please. She stopped. She didn't turn around. She just spoke over her shoulder, her voice carrying on the wind. Goodbye, Andrew. I'd say write to me, but I don't read mail from strangers. She began to walk, her stride long and purposeful. Behind her, she heard the commotion. Andrew Sterling. Hands where we can see them. Get on the ground. Now, you have the right to remain silent. She didn't look back. She didn't flinch as the handcuffs clicked. She simply pulled her coat tighter, adjusted her scarf, and walked out of the park. As she reached Fifth Avenue, she stopped at a trash can. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her wedding ring, a 10-carat diamond that felt heavy as lead. She looked at it one last time. It didn't sparkle in the gray light. It just looked like cold, hard stone. She dropped it into the trash. Then, for the first time in 10 years, Lydia Hale smiled. A real smile, a smile that reached her eyes. She hailed a taxi. JFK Airport, she said. International Terminal. The taxi merged into traffic, leaving the sirens and the ruins of Andrew Sterling's empire far behind. 6 months later, Otisville Federal Correctional Institution, New York. The fluorescent lights of the prison library buzzed with a low, irritating hum that drilled into Andrew Sterling's skull. It was a far cry from the muted, ambient lighting of his corner office on Wall Street. Here, there was no mahogany, no view of the harbor, and definitely no assistants running to fetch him an espresso. Andrew sat at a metal table, stacking battered paperbacks onto a cart. This was his empire now. He was inmate number 74922B. His net worth was 0. His reputation was negative. He wasn't in maximum security white collar. Criminals rarely were, but the isolation was absolute. Jessica hadn't visited. Not once. His former board members hadn't written. Even Harrison, his lawyer, had stopped accepting his collect calls after the sentencing hearing. Andrew picked up a discard pile of magazines left by another inmate. On top was a copy of the Wall Street Journal, 3 days old. He usually avoided the business section. It was too painful. But today, the headline caught his eye. It wasn't a headline about the economy. It was a picture. It was a photograph of the Sterling Vanguard Tower. But the gold lettering his name was gone. In its place was a sleek, modern logo in blue steel. The Hale Center for Medical Innovation. Andrew's hands trembled, crinkling the newsprint. He read the article, his breath hitching in his throat. In a stunning turnaround, the assets of the defunct Sterling Vanguard equity firm have been liquidated and repurposed. The buyer, a blind trust now revealed to be led by Lydia Hale, formerly Madeline Sterling, has donated the prime real estate to a nonprofit consortium. Andrew read on, his stomach churning. The Hale Center will focus on transparent, ethical funding for life-saving pharmaceuticals, specifically correcting the market manipulation that destroyed Hale Pharmaceuticals a decade ago. We are not here to make a profit, Miss, Hale stated in a press conference in Paris. We are here to clear a name. Andrew dropped the paper. She hadn't just taken his money. She hadn't just taken his freedom. She had taken his legacy and paved over it with the name of the man he had destroyed. She had erased Andrew Sterling from history and replaced him with Robert Hale. Sterling. A guard barked from the doorway. You got mail. Andrew looked up, a flicker of pathetic hope igniting in his chest. Jessica? An appeal lawyer? He walked to the bars. The guard handed him a single, thick envelope. It was cream-colored, heavy stock. The handwriting was impeccable. He knew that handwriting. He had seen it on dinner party invitations for 10 years. Andrew took the envelope back to his bunk. He sat down on the thin, scratchy mattress. He opened it slowly. There was no letter. No words of gloating. No I told you so. Inside was a single, official document. It was a receipt. Sotheby's Auction House. Paris. Item. Portrait of a gentleman. Oil on canvas. 19th century. Price. $4,200,000. Buyer. Lydia Hale. Andrew stared at the receipt. It was the painting, the one he had sold from her private collection 5 years ago to cover a gambling debt in Monaco. He had told her it was lost in transit during a move. She had cried for weeks. It was the only heirloom she had left of her grandfather. She had bought it back. With his money, paperclipped to the receipt was a small, Polaroid photo. It showed the painting hanging on a wall in a sun-drenched apartment in Paris. In the foreground, a table was set for one. A glass of wine, a crust of bread, and a view of the Eiffel Tower. It was a picture of peace. Andrew stared at the photo until his eyes burned. He realized then the true depth of her revenge. She wasn't thinking about him. She wasn't agonizing over him. She wasn't angry anymore. She had moved on. He was rot in a cell, obsessing over the past. She was in Paris, drinking wine, living the life he had promised her but never delivered. Andrew curled up on the bunk, turning his face to the concrete wall. The silence of the cell pressed in on him. For 10 years, he had been the loud one, the dominant one. Now, he had nothing but silence. And in that silence, he finally understood. The opposite of love isn't hate. It's indifference. She had walked away smiling because she didn't care enough to cry. Paris, France. Lydia Hale stood on the balcony of her apartment in the 7th arrondissement. The evening air was cool, smelling of rain and roasting chestnuts. She held a glass of Bordeaux, watching the lights of the city flicker on. Her phone buzzed on the table. It was a message from Sebastian Cole. The transfer is complete. The scholarship fund in your father's name is active as of this morning. You did it, Lydia. It's over. Lydia looked at the screen. She didn't feel a surge of triumph. She didn't feel a rush of adrenaline. She felt light. For 12 years, 2 of grieving, 10 of plotting, she had been carrying a stone. She had carried the weight of her father's suicide, the weight of Andrew's ego, the weight of her own deception. She had played a role so perfectly that she had almost forgotten who she was. But now, the stone was gone. She typed a reply. Thank you, Sebastian, for everything. She put the phone down. She took a sip of wine. She looked at the empty chair across from her. She didn't need anyone to fill it. Not anymore. She turned back to the view, the Iron Lady, glowing gold in the distance. She took a deep breath, filling her lungs with air that tasted like freedom. Lydia Hale closed her eyes and, for the first time in a decade, she didn't have to fake a smile. She simply existed. And that is the story of how Andrew Sterling lost everything not because of a market crash, but because he underestimated the quiet woman standing 2 steps behind him. It's a brutal reminder that the most dangerous person in the room isn't the one shouting orders, it's the one taking notes. Lydia Hale didn't use a gun or a lawyer to get her justice. She used time, she used patience, and she used the one thing Andrew never thought she had, a memory. In the end, Andrew is sitting in a cell, wondering where he went wrong, while Lydia is in Paris, finally living the life that was stolen from her family. It makes you wonder, how many other silent wives are out there right now, just waiting for the right moment to sign the papers? What did you think of Lydia's revenge? Was it justice? Or did she go too far by destroying his entire life? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Would you have the patience to wait 10 years to settle a score? If you enjoyed this story of high-stakes drama and ultimate payback, please give this video a like. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss a new story. We drop new episodes every week. Thanks for listening, and remember, be careful who you underestimate.